Hello, this is Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer.
Welcome home.
Soar into tower. We are ready for takeoff.
Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Hey, it's Amy from DVC Clubhouse.
Hey Clubbers, it's Scott from DVC Clubhouse.
Hey, it's Kathleen from DVC Clubhouse.
Welcome aboard. It's Phil from DVC Clubhouse.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Debrief podcast brought to you by DVC Clubhouse. This is Amy, and I'm joined by Scott, Kathleen, and Phil.
Hi, guys.
Hi guys.
Welcome aboard, guys.
You know, the smirks sometimes when I'm starting to read off, well, I'm saying read off, but as if I should know, memorized your names, but I don't know. But you all smirk at me, and I feel all of a sudden I can feel the pressure. I'm like, I'm feeling like everyone's watching me.
I mean, is anybody else a little insulted by the fact that after all this time, she still can't just remember our names off the top of her head?
I think that there's like a weird thing between like seeing you, like if I close, maybe I should close my eyes and I'd be able to do it just fine. But it's seeing you and all of like the nonsense that you all put on the screens that I'm not allowed to say because it's all rated R.
Yeah, it is. Usually it's just my name, but it has been so darn warm up here. I had to put a little exclamation on my name today.
I know it's been really hot in New Jersey too.
It's nice and cool in Florida.
How did that work?
A cool 88 today.
We're above you
Ah.
in New England. How's that?
Wow.
Same in New Jersey.
But we have 340% humidity.
I'm looking right now to see what the current temperature is in my location. And there's also an air quality alert, severe weather alert. 98, it feels like 98 degrees with the humidity here.
Oh, wow. Right now it says it's 88 and it feels like 94.
Yeah, so it sucks to be up north.
But definitely sucks to be in Disney World waiting in line when it's that hot. So
Yes.
which leads to what we're actually going to talk about in this episode.
Good segue,
Which
Amy.
is thank you. Which is all about the best and worst queues at Walt Disney World. And just so everyone knows how this conversation came about, I was the last one to log into this session to record this episode, and when I logged in, Kathleen, Scott, and Phil were talking about Navi River Journey and bashing it. I walked into a bash session of that ride.
There it is. That's my vote. I'm done for the episode. Worst queue in all of Walt Disney World.
And so it struck off this long. We started having this conversation about the queues, and then we're like, all right, so what should we talk about? And Phil was like, well, we could talk about this. So we're like, all right, let's do it. So
now we just need to rehash 35 minutes of conversation we've already had prior to hitting the record button.
I have to look at my Disney experience and check out all these rides just so I don't forget something.
We started prior to the episode talking about Navi River Journey, and Amy said she loves it and everybody else is very meh about it. And I simply said that I think the juice is not worth the squeeze on that ride. I think it is an adequate ride at best. I think it's got some beautiful visuals, but that is by far the worst ride queue in all of Disney. It's enclosed. It's tight little cutbacks that seem to go on forever. That is one of those queues where you think you're getting closer, only to find out after you turn around, you're actually getting further away and you can't figure out how or why. And it isn't until the final, I don't know, what is it? 75 feet that you actually get inside for the queue and you get a little bit of air conditioning and
you
you're
like
on
enter
top
that
of
little
people.
tunnel.
Yeah, and you're already in the hottest park in all of Walt Disney World. So you want to talk about 357% humidity. And then you get into all of those switchbacks only to go on like a 5-minute adequate boat ride. It's like the next generation Three Caballeros ride with a shaman that maybe works 60% of the time if it's not in B mode. Just the worst payoff possible. I said that if it weren't a 10-minute or less wait, I'm not even going in.
Well, I love the ride. I think it's visually stunning, but part of the way that this conversation evolved and why we decided to spend time on it is because I think you, Scott and Kathleen, you were talking about how long the wait was, 75 minutes when you were there last
Mm-hmm.
the other day.
Yeah.
And I said I wouldn't wait 75 minutes in that line, but there are very few. And then I actually said there are no lines at this point as a DVC member who goes as frequently that I do, that I would wait 75 minutes for. But if I needed to stand in a queue for 75 minutes, there are definitely queues that I could tolerate more than others.
If every ride were 75 minutes, I would wait in line to get back on the launch to go back to Polynesian and get in the pool. That is the only line I would wait in if everything were 75 minutes.
Well, let me ask you a question before we get into the best and the worst. And I guess that this might, I don't know if this really is about the queue, but if you were told that you had to go on one ride and the queue was going to be 60 minutes, but you could only, it was going to only be one ride, any park, you had to wait for 60 minutes, which ride would you choose?
I got Guardians.
Yeah, Guardians was my first. The only thing that keeps me from Guardians is if I could only ride one ride, I'm going to Haunted Mansion because I love Haunted Mansion more. It's a longer ride, it's cooler, but I would not wait that long for Haunted Mansion. So Guardians was my first gut reaction. I think it's the only one that's worth it. But if I can only ride one in a day, I'm going to have to pick Haunted Mansion.
For me, it's
Yeah.
Pirates because I love Pirates. I've got the nostalgia. The bulk of that line, I mean, all of the line is indoors. So you're not baking in the sun. And then you've got a long enough ride that you feel like you're getting some bang for your buck after waiting in the line for as long as you have. And I just think that queue is incredibly well done. That is one of my memories from the first time going to Disney World was in that queue, just feeling, this was, as a 14-year-old who's only at that point been to like Six Flags and Hershey Park, stepping into a ride queue felt like it was part of the experience. Like I was already in the ride.
I'll agree with your Pirates because that was actually going to be on my list of favorite ride queues. And it's probably the one I have the most memories of as a child as well. So I don't think that's a bad call at all.
And I mean, are you guys picking Guardians because of the ride or because of the queue? Because I find that queue to be kind of brutal.
I'm picking Guardians because all of the queues inside, and it gives you some, some relief from the heat outside. I have waited outside before, but it was for just briefly.
Oh, I picked it. All I heard was one ride per day you could pick, no matter what. It's 60 minutes. And that's just my favorite ride, so I just picked it because of the ride.
No,
But yeah,
but
everything is inside, so
yeah, everything. I was torn between Guardians and what Amy said, Pirates, because that queue is inside pretty much, and you get relief from the sun. And I do like Pirates. I think those are the only. I think those would be my top two.
So taking the ride element away from Guardians, do you enjoy the queue?
the pre-show is probably a notch above everybody else's pre-show, with the exception of Avatar, which tends to annoy me a little bit because it's a 20-minute pre-show.
What about Dinosaur? That pre-show
Is amazing.
is
I've only got to
amazing.
ride it once. Yeah.
You're such a liar.
I'm not allowed to ride that ride.
You're such a liar. I'm sorry, but I can't wait until that ride's gone.
I'm just pained hearing that. I love that ride.
I love
don't
that
like it.
ride too.
I hate it.
You're
I
not
hate
going
it
to
so
make it.
much.
You're not gonna make it.
We'll actually do that driving down the highway. I'll just hear my kids in the back seat start shouting, left, right, right. We're not going to make it.
I don't know.
That pre-show is fun, but the queue itself is pretty. I mean, once It used to you'd get a little kick out of the fact that, once when it was because it was sponsored by McDonald's, that all of those pipes had the formula for what ketchup, mustard, and mayonnaise. Like, that's a
Yep.
cute little touch, but it doesn't make sense anymore. And otherwise, that queue it's kind of cute, but it's not high on my list. But the pre-show, I mean, that's a different conversation. Pre-shows, dinosaur pre-show is up there for me.
I agree, and I like the Guardians pre-show. I think it's well done, but I also think it's, for us, kind of become like the old Maelstrom post-show. Like, how quickly can I get through these doors to get on to the next thing? The first couple of
Hmm.
times we saw it, and now you can pick out those who have done the ride before versus those who haven't, because we walk into
Hmm.
that final room and there's about 40 of us crammed on that door all the way to the right
Yeah.
while everyone else is
Mhm.
watching. Again, I think it's entertaining. I think it's well done, but I don't think the pre-show has a lot of repeatability to it.
You just struck up some nostalgia for me talking about the maelstrom rushing through so that you could get
Right,
out of
you
there
could get to
before
the
they
open
start
door
that
on the other
movie.
side, exactly. You just run as fast as you could before it closed up so you weren't stuck there.
I I really do miss that ride. That was a thing of Epcot legend, the whole ride with the trolls and the mini drop, and then the accent of the narrator, and then rushing through the end to get out, and just how cute it looked, like it looked like that little Norwegian fishing village. Ugh.
And it was so cool to actually have the ride open to the front of Norway, where they actually had the big hole in the rocks where everything went by, and they closed that up. It's kinda sad.
Yeah, it is. But you know what? Maybe we should do an episode at some point about things that we miss.
So, okay, I'll spoil it just a little bit. You know what I was thinking about the other day, talk about things of legend, and you brought it up when you said McDonald's sponsoring Dinosaur. There was actually a giant partnership that was beyond just sponsoring that ride. Do you remember the McDonald's now that is over on the other side of property? Do you remember what it used to look like with the giant burger and Happy Meal sticking out the side of the building? Who else misses
I
that?
sure do.
It was awful and
I
amazing at the
sure
same
remember
time.
it. And in my 20s, I used to, when I was with friends or family before having kids, we'd go to Jelly Rolls. And then after Jelly Rolls, we would hop in a cab that would take us over to that McDonald's and go through the drive through. So we digress a little bit about things that we miss. So to get it back on task,
We
but
digress
we
about a
both got
lot of
very
things.
yeah, we both got very excited about some nostalgia. So we gotta get the train back on the track. So to come back to ride queues, so I asked the question about the 60 minutes, but now taking the ride out of consideration, what do you think? And the pre-show. So taking the ride and the pre-show out of consideration, what do you think are the best queues? I mean, and I'll stand by Pirates for sure. Like, I think Pirates is amazing.
Yeah,
Mm,
as soon as you said that, I actually tend to agree. I just always go to Haunted Mansion because it's such an incredible ride, but I think Pirates has a much better queue and rewritability. So I'm just going to change my answer to side with Amy.
Got
I also
anything?
think that Animal Kingdom
Thinking.
has a lot of really great queues. I remember the first time I ever went to Animal Kingdom, shortly after it had opened, and just falling in love with the queues. I loved the queue for, and still do, the queue for Kali River Rapids. I don't really ride that much anymore because I'm typically alone and I don't want to have to bring a change of clothes with me to the parks. I've gotten way too wet on that ride to it has scared me off a little bit, but I love that queue. I think it's so pretty and so well done.
I do enjoy Everest. They're cute.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think the Everest queue is really great too. I mean, I think
A
that
thousand
those are
percent.
two rides where they really took built a storyline for the ride and infused the whole storyline through the queue.
I have been in that queue at Everest more times than I can count, and I constantly discover something
Hmm.
new in that queue. A new photo I hadn't seen, a new description, some little knickknack. There is so much in that ride queue to see.
Well, and I'm not gonna say that Kilimanjaro Safaris has a great queue because it doesn't. But back in the day, when the ride first came out and it had the storyline that I guess the problematic storyline it was fun to hear the narration of what was happening before you got onto the ride vehicle. So like visually and heat wise, that queue stinks, but it was a little bit kind of like a fun little storyline going on in that queue before you would hop aboard and then try to catch the poachers.
That's Jungle Cruise for me. That is one of the worst line cues, that back and forth. But the music and the narration that are constantly going overhead are amazing.
I'm trying to think of a ride in each park right now.
Test Track. I love Test Track. I hate that they're changing it.
You like the ride queue at Test Track?
Yeah. I mean, I get to create a car.
All right, fair enough. I was thinking about the part before that, but I can understand that. All right.
Yeah, the part before is kind of blah, but at least you get to see some cool cars, and then it's interactive where you get to pick the car that you're gonna. I always love that part about it, but I don't know. Queues? I have no idea. I hate Big Thunder. I'll say that. I can't stand Big Thunder's queue.
Especially when both sides are open and you're like, I'm almost there. Nope, going to the other side before we go down below.
I feel like it's
It's
never ending.
so hot in that queue. So
It can
hot.
be.
Yeah. That for me is a cue that depends on the temperature outside. I can kind of enjoy the theming and the music and the sounds if I'm not sweltering and melting in that queue.
I love the ride. Just
Peter
queue, not
Pan's
so
cute.
much. Peter Pan?
Peter Pan's cute.
So Peter Pan has benefited from when they redid the ride queue. That used to be awful. It was just a back and forth to nowhere. Since they've made it interactive and they've, made the bedrooms a little more fun as you're walking through everything, I think it's a much better queue. Now, with that said, if we can't get it with little to no wait, or if we just happen to have Genie Plus that day, that's not one even interactive that we are willing to wait in. It's just far too short for the amount of time you've got to spend in line. As much as I love it, I have a ton of nostalgia. I just don't think it's worth it.
No.
Well, and the reason why it's so long is because it's a slow moving ride. So you're not you're not constantly moving. You're standing still for long periods of time, and that I can't stand. I would walk 50,000 steps a day before I would agree to stand in the one spot for an hour without moving.
And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, when they had the social distancing for the queues and you had to go through Columbia Harbor House and up the stairs and down the stairs and through the hallway before you even got near Peter Pan, you thought you were in line for Haunted Mansion, and it turns out it was just the end of the line for Peter Pan somewhere down in Liberty Square.
Yeah, that was madness.
Haunted Mansion has benefited a lot from all of the interactivity that they brought in, the water pouring out of the captain's tomb, the books, the music. There's a lot to do there. But as we said, I think before we started recording, most of it is outside. So that can be a pretty brutal one to wait in if it's hot.
And even with the addition of those switchbacks and all of those interactive elements, that line can still extend really far down into Frontierland. And that's just, I have no patience for that. Like, no thanks. What do you guys think about Space Mountain?
I don't know. I don't ride it.
I don't.
The silence says it all. There's nothing there.
Yeah, I don't remember the last time I rode it.
I don't ride Space Mountain that much. Lily loves Space Mountain.
We'll either rope drop it or make sure we get Genie Plus. It's not worth, again, if it's not 25 minutes or less, we're typically not interested. We love the ride, but the kids are just not. And plus, we've been through it, I don't know, 42,000 times, and we still have not been able to do the play parks, get all the symbols thing. That they must have some hidden behind panels or something, because we're still missing, I think, 3 of them, despite numerous attempts.
Space Mountain is one that also, when I was a teenager, I thought it was really cool because I thought that it, tied in so well with the theming. I think now I'm just typically either, to your point, rope dropping it or doing Genie Plus. So I'm like rushing through it. And so it doesn't really and honestly, it gets really bad up once you get to the like loading area and all of those switchbacks. So
Yeah.
like anything that was cool heading up, you've long forgotten about that once you get to the loading area and you are taking these long switchbacks like back and forth and back and forth. That's not enjoyable at all. So I mean, I think that I think Rise is difficult because so much of Rise is pre-show, which was genius. I mean, I think that having that pre-show area, I mean, having these like multiple pre-shows where literally the first time I rode Rise, I didn't even know when you're in like that transport vehicle. I was like, is this the ride? Like because I hadn't watched any spoilers. So I had no idea what was going on, what was going to happen. And so that I think they did a really good job of making an immersive theme and then also doing things like creating distractions because you're never really standing for too long in a place where you are not having some sort of distraction to make you, that you need to pay attention to, that you're being engaged in some way.
So, without a spoiler alert, one of the ride queues that we disliked the most used to be Splash Mountain. You guys have been through there. Is the queue similar to what it used to be?
It's the exact same
Yeah, it's
walkthrough.
pretty
Is it? Okay.
similar. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
just
the
different
Because
exact
stuff.
same
those
thing.
could be totally endless switchbacks out in that courtyard before you even had to go up and down the stairs.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, everything inside is different, and there's a little more, I don't know what I would call it, almost like a little touch of like how Remy's is. You know what I mean? Like in the queue, like with the video board and things
Oh,
like
okay.
that. They did some pretty cool stuff with the inside, but outside is still
It's same exact.
the exact same brutal, just never ending switchback.
I mean, talk about brutal queue. That Remy queue is brutal.
Oh,
Yeah, that
that's
one's
very
That
pretty rough.
I
brutal.
will never ever ride that without Lightning Lane because that queue is just the worst.
That's probably one of my least favorite queues.
I was
is
going to say
Remy's.
either that one or the one that I both love and hate is Toy Story Mania because I love to see throwbacks to my childhood with like the big Uno cards and things like that. But for whatever reason, that queue never seems to end because everybody in the park manages to snag a lightning lane for that.
Mhm.
And I feel like I
And that's
never
another one
get to
that's
that.
slow moving so that you're standing in
Yeah.
I feel like I'm standing in place for a long time in that queue.
Slinky Dog's
Yeah.
the same way. It just switches
Yeah.
back and forth forever and does not move at all.
Wait, I think Slinky Dog may be the worst
I think it's up there
queue
for sure.
in all of Walt Disney World.
I still give it to Navi, but Slinky Dog's a close second.
At least Navi is covered.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I'd rather sit in Slinky Dog than Remy's.
I don't like Flight of Passage. Did we talk about that one? We
Yeah,
talked
that's a
Don't
about
like
long
that
one.
queue?
No, I hate it. I think it's the longest thing ever, and especially we talked about COVID times. I mean, you were backed up all the way to the safari trying to ride
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Flight
not
of
wrong.
Passage.
It
And-
was
We've been
so true.
we were
I was
I
like-
remember we were backed up almost near Tusker House.
well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like you get
Like
the-
almost
Oh.
to the
That's all the way across the bridge.
yes. Hmm.
when you get inside, it never ends. That's like what Phil said. You go around a corner thinking you're about to see the ride, and you just see another hallway full of endless people. And at least it's inside, but everybody's so crammed together that after about 45 minutes in line of smelling the guy in front of you, it tends to get a little uncomfortable.
I am always a proponent of we need to stop spending money for them to stop charging it. And that's just one of those rides I will buy our way on. The same with Guardians. I will just buy our way on because the merge point truly is worth it for the money. And you save so much time. I just can't justify standing in line or missing a virtual queue and then not being able to get on the ride as far as Guardians. I will buy us onto those two every single time so I can say they were done. They're knocked off the list. It was $60 for the family and move on.
One of my least favorite queues, but one that I will do repeatedly because I love the ride is Soarin'.
It's on
mean-
my list as well. It was the next one I was going to bring up.
Holy, I won't say I won't say something that you're going to have to bleep out, but
Go
man.
for it. I have the edit function.
Yeah. But that thing, I mean, first of all, it's like you're walking uphill, right? Like I feel like I'm like walking uphill and it's like a long corridor. And they thought that having trivia was going to be enough to keep people happy.
Was that ride ever that popular where you had to have it that far away from the actual entrance of the ride?
Yes. Absolutely.
And
Because I feel like I walked 2 miles before I
I
get
don't
to where I need
understand a
to.
lightning lane for that ride because were you merged on that ride with the lightning lane?
It's before the
never-
longest wait.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah. Yeah.
I never understood that.
Oh my gosh. Talk about like smells. Some of my like worst memories of being in line where it just smelled like human in the worst possible way in Soarin' because you're kind of side by side with another line and it's like you're surrounded by people. Oh gosh. And the railings that they have, they just if you touch them, they
Mhm.
feel I don't know, like they feel you can feel the sweat on them. I don't
It's
know.
probably
just
the one ride we're
gross.
constantly disinfecting the children, and we
Yeah.
are not disinfect all the time kinds of people. But my wife walks through that entire queue with a bottle of Purell at the ready from and then the walls that people are leaning against the rail and taking
Mhm.
their shoes off and putting their feet on the corrugated wall. And you're like, oh, the problem for me with that queue isn't just that it's long, isn't just that it's boring. Number one, when as Scott said, when you get to the merge point, you think you're finally there. It's still another 20 minutes as you're waiting for them to board the flights. Then you've got to actually get to the boarding area, and it's another 9 minutes before you board the flight. But the problem for me is actually the super wide carpeted area before, because there's no order to it. My mind craves order, and I have a little bit of an attitude problem. So I can only let so many families squeeze 9 people past me and my kids because they think they're going to gain a 30-second advantage before I start throwing sharp elbows into the crowd. It's just humanity at its worst when you start cramming that many people in a wide queue.
It's like you need to interlock arms with your family and stand like across to keep people from trying to pass you.
It's insane. Just people holding hands 5 wide, weaving their way through the crowd to get further ahead than everybody else. It's enraging.
And then also, when you finally get to the area, like the staging area where you watch the Patrick Warburton little clip, that you're like literally in a cage. Like it is like
Mhm.
a fenced in cage. And if you are in the middle row, then you've got people on either side of you in a cage after you've just walked through these sweaty, carpeted tunnels that go uphill.
There's your mistake. We always send Luke and Mackenzie up front with big giant smiles to request the prime row, and we don't sit anywhere else.
What?
I wasn't going to publicize it. We don't want to tell everybody our secrets, for goodness sake.
Well, you can edit it out. Here, I'll say C3.
C3. Yes, you definitely want C3.
So another cue that's not great, but that has, has a little moment of awe is the Frozen ride because that queue is pretty terrible. But when you get to go see Big Summer Blowout, that guy,
Mhm.
Yoo-hoo!
yeah, I mean that's worth a little chuckle, but the rest of the queue is a little bit daunting, especially when it's stretching all the way down to like the World
Oh,
Showcase
yeah.
Promenade and it's turning towards China. I
Yeah.
mean, no thanks.
They had switchbacks in China. Talk about the social distancing lines. You used to go up the line. It would
Ugh.
switch back in the little entrance between the two countries. It was brutal.
And although the queue for the Mexico boat ride is always very short, it's terrible.
It's
And
so narrow.
it's
I like
yes,
Phil's.
it's
Phil, I want to hear your
yeah.
story again with the
Yeah.
plexiglass.
I've told that on the episode, haven't I did on the show, right?
You did.
Yes, you
Okay,
did.
yeah, I had to have fun with that one. Oh, that woman was so angry with me that night. We had the whole plexiglass row just bouncing back and forth as I was bouncing off of it. Oh, was she getting mad? So we keep talking about, and I need to throw a plug in here. We keep talking about how difficult some of these cues are, and I can tell you it's tough as an adult, but when you've got little kids trying to keep them entertained in some of these, I cannot say enough for the heads up game on our phone,
No.
especially with the Disney Parks deck, and how many hours my children have spent playing heads up in line just to keep them entertained. I typically do not like the usage of devices and phones in line, but that one, at least they're interacting with each other. They don't have their face buried in a phone playing a game by themselves. It involves the whole family and it keeps them entertained. So if anybody has little kids and they don't have that app to wait in line, I cannot recommend it highly enough.
You know what nobody mentioned?
What?
And it's like halfway
Tell us,
bad
Scott.
and halfway good. Nobody mentioned the Tower of Terror.
Oh,
What a beautiful job they did with the inside of that. The
I like it.
outside, it kind of sucks.
The outside queue does suck a little.
But man,
Well, I think the only good part of that queue is when you are walking through the hotel lobby, which you are doing for about 10 seconds. Because then the lead up is terrible. Then you walk through the lobby, that's amazing. The pre-show is terrific. But then you are in like the bowels of hell. It's crammed into these dark, like what looks like a horror film. I mean, clearly I think clearly based on something that's supposed to look and feel creepy and spooky, but you're like in a cellar, like a furnace room of a old hotel, crammed in there with people, and it's dark. And so I mean, they did a good job making you feel like you're in an undesirable place because you
They
are.
did a really good job because my children will not ride Tower of Terror. They do not like the queue. They do not like the lead up. It freaks them out. But they will do Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout at DCA. Happy to do that. Same exact ride, same exact vehicles, does the exact same thing, but with a different theme. They will do that, but I cannot get them anywhere near Tower of Terror. It was a one and done for them, specifically because
Oh.
it spooks them out. They don't like the queue in that buildup.
Hmm.
Weirdly, that Guardians ride at DCA makes me feel so motion sick compared to Tower of Terror.
I'm the exact opposite. That's interesting.
Another one, and this is like a silly little one, but I've always really enjoyed the walkthrough at the Finding Nemo ride. And I would hate to have to stand in a really long line. Thankfully, you never have to do that because it's always like a 5-minute wait. But I really think they did a cute job, like where you walk in and you feel like it's like a little boardwalk area, and then you're all of a sudden like you're in the water, and they have those projections overhead that make you feel like you're underwater. Like
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like some very creative Imagineering there.
There's a hack to that one. I've told that story, right?
No.
So when Mackenzie had to be maybe 2 or 3. Luke and Em were doing something. To this day, Mackenzie and I do Finding Nemo every single trip. It is our father-daughter ride. I have a selfie of us in the clamshells at every trip. She was little, and we went on that ride. It was late at night. It was maybe 8 o'clock. It was cold. We didn't want to go outside, and we went through the queue, and we did the ride, and we walked out all the way through the gift shop and all the way back to the front and all the way through the queue and got on the ride again, and it was empty. Went through the ride, got off, went through the gift shop on probably ride 4 or 5 because we were the only people there doing it. The girl that was working the ride queue said, when you get off, immediately take a left. There's a door. Come right back in, and that door will lead you right back to here. It's about a 10-foot walk just around this little hidden door. We rode that ride. I think she counted us 16 times that night. And after the first 4 or 5, we would get off the ride. We'd go through the door. We'd come right back to the front of the queue. We'd get on a clamshell. We'd get off the ride. We'd go through the door. We'd come through the front. And on one of the last times through, that same girl who was there, she was a CP, was waiting with a talking giant stuffed Nemo. And she said, you rode this ride so many times tonight, Nemo decided he wanted to go home with you. And she gave Mackenzie the stuffed Nemo. We had a huge cast compliment. We shouted out to her. But if you get off the ride, just
man.
walk through that little door when no one's looking, you can get right back in line and avoid the whole queue.
Aw.
That is so amazing. See the Disney difference right there.
That was an amazing night. I think that was the same trip that we did the escalator and stair ride, and she had the cheering squadron. They went and made signs for her that said "Go Mackenzie," and there were like 10 cast members cheering her on the entire time because we'd go down the escalator and up the stairs, down the escalator, up the stairs. And they set up a whole cheering section for her. There was glitter involved. It was incredible.
That's so nice, but I'm going to bring it back to negativity now. All right. 2 words.
I love you.
Gary Sinise. That's all I'm going to say.
All right.
Phil, you look a lot like Gary Sinise. I'm not going to lie. A nice rugged version of Gary Sinise.
I'm going to take that as a compliment, brother. Thank you.
You're welcome. But that pre-show that used to be at Mission Space, I hate that ride with a passion. I don't care about the queue. I don't care about the pre-show. I will never ride that ride again. It's the worst ride, the worst pre-show. I won't even watch a movie with Gary Sinise in it anymore. He lied to me. He told me I was going to be okay. I wasn't okay. I'll never ride that again.
You're out.
I was out of commission for the whole day after that.
You closed your eyes and lifted your head off the back of the seat, didn't you?
I don't know what I did. I thought I was going to be okay when I saw the older lady in front of me getting off the ride, the little girl also, and they were fine. But I was not okay. I don't know what happened, but that's the worst ride queue ever.
So a few points for that. Number one, if you think that was bad, we actually went on that ride in the first month it was open before they toned it down. That ride is nothing compared to what it used to be. It is
Even the
half
orange?
it is half the intensity of what it was.
Well, what you guys need to realize is that they didn't have two different versions of it. You only got the
Death version?
the spinning version that would make you, knock you out of commission for the
And
day.
it was much higher G's, and people had heart attacks. They had to tone it down. It was insanely intense when it first opened.
How many G's is that?
It doesn't bother me at all.
I think I looked it up once, and I think it max, it's like 3 or 4. I can't remember. It's not huge, but it was worse when it first opened.
I felt like Maverick in Top Gun pushing 10 G's.
Yeah, I've done the orange and the green, and I'm good.
Right,
Oh, yeah,
second point for
Okay.
me, I am such a geek and a child sometimes. Luke and I do that ride all the time, and I am completely convinced every single time that I am an astronaut. I have been selected for the Special Astronaut Corps, and I am going to space. I geek out about it. Third point, Gary Sinise is a god. Just look at how many Gold Star children he brings to Disney
Yeah.
every single year. He can get away with anything he wants, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, he lied to me. Actually, is he even in the pre-show anymore?
He is not.
I was going to say, I think they've changed it since then, but that's old school back in the day.
So Rock and Roller Coaster is pretty terrible up until
Yep.
you get to the pre-show. That's a great pre-show, but that queue is also yes, we can. Sorry, I keep interrupting myself. I don't know which direction I want to go in. I'll finish the Rock and Roller Coaster thought. The first time, when they had the magic bands and you walk into that room where the posters and they'll have your name on it. Like the first time I saw that, I thought that was so cool.
I'm going to space and you're actually a groupie, so we all have our dreams.
So the one thing that I will say, I know we're not talking about pre-shows, but the thing that annoys me now about Rock and Roller Coaster is that pre-show used to have a real person sitting in that room tuning tuning a guitar. And when what's his name, Steven Tyler, actually talks to him in the pre-show and is like, "Hey, bring me my whatever the brand of guitar is that he's talking about." And the guy gets up off the stool and goes out to give it to him. And they, I guess, due to budget cuts, they're like, "We don't need to pay a guy to sit on a stool tuning a guitar." So I just wanted to get a little RIP to the cast member that used to sit in there. And I feel like that guy being gone kind of, it's a little sad.
Yeah, it took a hokey pre-show and turned it into a really hokey pre-show when you took the live actor out.
Yeah. But so the reason why I was interrupting myself was because of Spaceship Earth. This is not a ride that I will ever stand in that queue. I ride that ride when there's a 5-minute wait. But when if you walk into the front entrance of Epcot and you see people in those switchbacks going back alongside Spaceship Earth, I'm just like, people, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
That's just a no. Don't do it.
I love that ride, and I've said I can remember every version, and it has so much nostalgia, but that queue is two extremes. Either it is the face of the sun
Yeah.
when the sun is beating down on you, or when it's cold, that is the biggest wind tunnel in all of Walt Disney World. It is frigidly cold underneath there.
Yeah, I just like it when you can walk in and you walk up that little ramp and in you go and off you go to time travel.
We didn't talk about It's a Small World yet. I mean, they have switchbacks. That's ridiculous enough.
They're never used. Rarely.
And there's a reason for that, Kathleen. That's when you know the parks are out of control, when It's a Small World is 60 minutes. You're like, "Dear God,
Yes.
It's a Small World is 60 minutes? Seven Dwarfs has gotta be 6 hours if It's a Small World is 60 minutes."
I say it all the time. Every time I look at the wait times and I see Small World like 30 minutes, I'm like, "Oh, Magic Kingdom's busy."
I just say they're lying.
That's the bellwether for the entire park. When
Yeah,
Small World
that's
gets
the tell.
busy, you know.
That's all you have to do. Go look at that wait.
It goes quick.
When we were talking over about Rise of the Resistance, I didn't talk about Smuggler's Run, but that's actually a really great queue. I think that that's a really fun queue. And especially if like you're a Star Wars person, I think that that's something that's like pretty appealing.
That's where they lose me. It's a really cool queue, but it just doesn't speak to me, so we rarely ever go there.
Mhm. Yeah, we don't go on that often.
Only if I get to be a pilot. Amy, are you a pilot, an engineer, or are you a gunner?
I typically only ride that ride when I'm with my kids, and they both have to be pilots all the time.
Same here. I've never been a pilot in all the times we've done it because I have 2 little kids, so you can forget about that.
But for last Clubhouse holiday reunion weekend, I rode that with Emily M, who was one of our guests that we had talking about gluten-free food at Disney, and then Steffi Berman, who's also a part of the Facebook group. And I asked them if I could be a pilot because they had, I guess, both been pilots in the past. But I told them, I was like, as many times as I've ridden this ride, I've never been a pilot. Can I please do it? And it was harder than I thought it was going to be because that thing is so sensitive to touch that if you just yank it a little bit, like the entire thing goes. And then Steffi told me that I did a bad job. I think I did a pretty good job, but so I did it one time.
Steffi is one of those people that just died a little inside when I said I wasn't a Star Wars person and could care less about the queue. I know she just screamed when she heard that part of the episode.
Oh my gosh, the fact that you don't like Riviera or Star Wars, you're dead to her.
I know. I'm surprised she even acknowledges my existence anymore. I told you
Yeah.
my kids were pilots last time and they crashed it so badly. Cast members assembled outside to see they hit everything but the lottery. It's all interactive. The smoke's coming out in the back. They destroyed everything. There were like 4 cast members just laughing hysterically when we came off the ride.
I'm not a Star Wars fan at all. I couldn't even tell you. I mean, I'm just gonna admit it. I've only watched like 1.5 episodes.
You were the pilot, and you asked me if you were Captain Kirk.
I never got into it. I'm not a fan. It's just not my thing.
We were in Hollywood Studios on May the 4th a couple of years ago and didn't even realize it had any sorts of Star Wars cultural significance. And we left after about 2 hours. And I said, there was some Star Wars fan who could not get into Hollywood Studios who just died inside because we were like, May the 4th, what is that?
I knew that. I knew that much, but I mean, I'll go over there, and I think the rides are pretty cool, but I'm just not a big fan of it. No, I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, you've seen all of them, and you
Yeah.
like Star
I
Wars,
love
but
it. It's not just May the 4th anymore. It's Revenge of the 5th.
Cinco de Mayo, that's Rosa time. So be careful there, buddy.
Yeah, they're right next to each other.
I feel like we've talked about almost like every ride. Scott brought up the magic carpets of Aladdin, but I think if you Aladdin, Dumbo, and Triceratops spins, those are not fun queues. Although I haven't ridden Dumbo at a time when the line was so long that you go into that building.
Oh, I
Isn't there
have.
like some sort of like
Yeah, so it's
play
actually
area in
really
there?
cool. Yeah, so if you've got little kids, you go into the building. If the line is super long, they will give you a pager similar to what restaurants have for tables when your table is ready. And your kids can play in the playground. And when a certain amount of time runs out, the time you would have spent in line, the pager goes off. You go back and you hand it to them, and then you can go get in the last part of the queue. That particular queue drives my wife out of her mind because you can lose track of the children so easily. And now you want to get to the ride, but they're having so much fun on the playground. You can't rip them out of the playground to go ride the ride. So thankfully, they're old enough now that we don't do much in the playground there. But that was actually a really interesting way of keeping children entertained in a really long queue without having them stand in line. I thought that was a really fantastic idea by the Imagineers.
I think that we've talked about a lot of the queues at Disney World. I do want to just give out a shout out to the queue for the Indiana Jones ride in Disneyland. I think that is really cool.
It is, but that is one that will go on forever. It is very deceiving being in that queue, how deep into the bowels of that ride you go before you actually get to the ride. It seems like a really long way, and it's awesome. It's very immersive. It's cool to look around, but it just kind of goes on forever. That's a really long queue.
It does. And, in fairness, I've only ridden the ride once. So I had the experience of just being in wonder and awe. The first, I don't have the experience of being a repeat rider and being like, okay, I've already seen all of this, so I don't care,
And if we're talking about Disneyland, their Jungle Cruise queue is much cooler because it actually goes upstairs and you get the 2 levels and you can look around. It's no less boring, but it is a much cooler version of what we have in Magic Kingdom.
Yeah. I mean, overall, I feel like the Disneyland, like the traditional lands, not like the addition of Galaxy's Edge to Disneyland, but I feel like their queues are overall like pretty boring. It's a very old park. Since it's such an old park, it is just most of them are just like switchbacks. The Pirates ride, I mean, for how much I love the queue of Pirates at Disney World, the Pirates queue at Disneyland is torture because it's all outside for the majority of it, and it's switchbacks and it's crowded, and just trying to find the end of it is on a crowded day is challenging.
It's a really cool entrance though, isn't it? To go under that sign over the top in New Orleans. It's actually a much cooler entrance than we have, but you're right.
And even, the Haunted Mansion queue is, I mean, they do have like a little bit of cool stuff inside, but the outside portion of the Haunted Mansion line there too is rough because it's just everything is it's a smaller park. They don't have as much space to work with, and it was older too. So I don't think that they were necessarily at that point being as creative with the queues. They were just making it about the rides.
Yeah, but that's going down either right now or very shortly for a complete redo, I believe. So I think you're going to see a lot of changes there in the next few months because they want to have it back open again for the holiday overlay. So I think they're going to bring a lot more into that particular queue here over the next few months. All right, if we hit them all, we're at 51 minutes.
Special shout out to Tomorrowland for every ride queue there sucking.
Yep, second that.
Total. Oh my gosh, Buzz is a terrible.
Buzz is awful. The People Mover when it's backed up is awful. Astro Orbiter is awful. That there's no
Tomorrowland Speedway,
the
terrible.
Speedway is terrible.
Monsters Inc. Laugh Floor is the only exception to that because I get to type cool dad jokes while I wait in line.
No, that's still terrible. That one is still terrible.
Yeah, I think the queue is terrible and it's still better than the attraction, but that's just me.
Phil, are you that guy?
Exactly the reaction I was hoping for from Scott.
Phil is that guy.
Yeah, Phil's that guy. I get my jokes on every single time.
You do.
It's you and 4 other people.
Here's one that we didn't talk about, and that's the Little Mermaid ride at Magic Kingdom. Because that's like a very long walkthrough.
It can
I feel
be,
like you're
yes.
walking forever in that one too.
There's some cool little Easter eggs in that queue that the Disney geek in me likes. So the Nautilus that's worked into the rock is kind of cool because it took over where 20,000 Leagues was. And we were also there, I think it's on Mickey's birthday, where the sun coming through the rock work will actually put a hidden Mickey in the center of the ride queue as it shadows the light coming through. And that was really cool. We made it a point to do that. I want to say it's on Mickey's birthday.
Yeah, that is very cool. And then I think finally, the final queue that I would like to bring up is the queue for Gideon's.
What?
No, thank you.
It sounds like that's going to become immaterial because Summer House on the Lake has cookies that are every bit as good, and it's a 3-minute wait.
Well, my opinion is Summer House has better cookies, but I will wait in Gideon's line for one cookie, and just one.
Lemon Pledge.
What is it? Oh, right.
The poppy seed lemon.
Pledge.
Scott calls it Lemon Pledge.
Lemon Pledge.
The lemon poppy seed cookie. Now, I'm going to get into the virtual queue. So I'm not going to just stand in line for 4 hours. I'm going to put my name in, and come back. But I will wait for that cookie, and that's it.
I would get in a virtual queue for Rosa, but never for a cookie.
I like that cookie.
The problem with the Gideon's queue, like I appreciate the fact that they have a virtual queue, but once they call you, the line is still pretty long.
Yeah, it's
and
still long.
You're outside, and often you are in the blazing heat there. So I will not do that
No.
ever again. And if I do, there is one cookie I will do it for, and it's the coffee cake cookie that they only have in the morning, which
Yeah.
typically it's not. If you get there really early, if you get there at like 9:30, you
It's not that-
you don't need
yeah.
to deal with it.
I think Kathleen gets an immediate disqualification because her two favorite cookies are Lemon Pledge and Crest toothpaste.
That's ice cream.
That's my favorite ice cream. Mint chocolate chip.
Crest chocolate chip.
Stop. Now, when the lemon cookie comes around at Gideon's, I end up buying like 3 or 4 and putting them in the freezer. Shut up.
Let the record indicate that Scott is holding up his hand to indicate at least 5 cookies.
But other than that, no, I'd rather go to Summer House. Their cookies are 10 times better, in my opinion.
Not just the cookies, but the cake.
And the cake. Yes.
All right. Well, seeing as we have closed down with the queue for cookies at Disney Springs, I think it's safe to assume we have exhausted everything.
Think so.
I suppose.
All right. Well, thanks for
Yeah.
sticking with us all the way through the Gidgen's cookie line. We thank you for listening. As always, if you could run along to Apple Podcasts, give us a like, a 5-star review, get other silly people to listen to our silly ramblings. Amy?
And come over to Facebook and join the conversation at our Facebook group, DVC Clubhouse. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And until next time, we'll DVC you real soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.
And so our journey comes to an end.
Oh, no, please, can't we go back to page 1 and do it all over again?
Started this thing together, and that's how we'll finish it.
Because that, my friends, is where the magic lives.
Happily ever